who just taught her in the bride. He first sees such a daring woman. Cardan continued. The countess listened. Valois asked. Daring. She asked the girl to be more restrained. Cardan answered. She tried to bite him. The king approached the girl in order to show, as an example, how the daughter of Count Lenoa tried to bite him. Like this. Cardan looked at the reaction of the countess. What she will do next, hit him or keep silent, as always. Valois stared at the king. That he only did. How he dared to bite her. You need to remain calm. She had no words. He had kicked out the count's daughter for an attempt to kiss him. It turns out the king deceived her, breaking the plan. Cardan was sorry, because the girl's appearance and outfit were his taste. He spoke and watched the reaction of the countess. The girl was in the nightshirt, the count said. This does not mean that he does not like her outfit. Valois froze with bewilderment. He again reminded her of that night, when she had a lot to get drunk and did not remember anything. Damn, she already forgot about it, Cardan said. Why does Valois wear these monstrous glasses? Without glasses, he likes her more. And he touched her face. That he was planning again. This is his insidious plan. Valois tried to read Cardan's thoughts in her gaze, but could not. She decided not to succumb to the spells and stop it all. The girl pushed the king away from all his might. Cardan was very surprised why the countess behaves like that with him. She answered, It's already very late, and it is time for her to go. About the case of the daughter of Count Lenoa, she will report to him after the investigation, at the meeting. With these words, the countess left. Cardan remained alone. He thought about the princess, about the girl, about his mother. How to deal with this all. Meanwhile, Count Lenoa did not believe that his daughter could encroach on the king's life. He cried, She is not capable of this. This is slander. She so admired his majesty. The count fell to his knees in front of Valois and prayed for mercy. Lenoa continued. Last time, he did not deliberately behave tactlessly in relation to the countess. Valois thought. He did not concentrate at a meeting of ministers, learned about the princess's case, and she was not given alcohol. The count said, Does the count think that she was all set up? Valois thought. The count continued to cry and pray for mercy. The countess offered to wait until everything settles. She too is very sorry that this happened. Then there will be explanations. Lenoa decided to offer a new ship in return for the liberation of his daughter. Valois liked the one on which they swam. Perhaps with the help of the ship, the countess will be able to escape. The chance of salvation has grown. Countess's eyes caught fire at the thought of this. The count was looking forward to an answer to his proposal. He really wanted to save his daughter from execution. She is innocent. Valois took out a sheet and a pen and invited the count to draw up a contract with her. The girl shone with thoughts about her salvation. Everyone gathered in the throne room to endure the verdict of the daughter of Count Lenoa. Whether the Cardan will forgive the girl such an act. The count cried and prayed for the mercy of his daughter. Valois thought about the contract. She received a ship, but there was no confidence. I am not sure that he can stop the Cardan if he decides to punish the count's family, but she would have to save herself at least. The king was thinking about what to do. Execute a girl, or forgive and let go with her father a count. He was silent. Valois thought, It is necessary to do something if the Cardan is silent for a long time. It can end poorly for everyone. She raised her hand and said that in the end, she would like to discuss the details of the incident with Countess Leno. The countess committed a serious crime that does not deserve forgiveness. Valois continued. The count shuddered with horror. However, there was no attempt to harm. This happened later, an excess of feelings and lack of manners. The girl said, Such words were very surprised by the Cardan. He did not expect the countess to respond so much about her recent ward. Valois understands what the column needs to please. She is a saint, and she says, This is all my fault. All were shocked by the behavior of Valois. She wanted to bear responsibility for the act of Countess Lenoa. The king was probably horrified, but this is all to protect his high position. Cardan was very surprised by these words. Having devoted all of herself, she will certainly find a humane and not wild concubine for the Cardan. Valois proudly summed up. Some time later, Valois apologized to Countess Leno for bad help to her. She did everything possible. The girl was very sad. She will never see a Cardan again because of her misconduct. She is punished. Valoa thought, "This is the dandelion girl. How can you do this?" But she remembered the cruelty of Cardan and exhaled. The countess said, "If someone likes the girl, let her tell her. She will help everything that can." Lenoa thanked. She would like to ask the countess to look after her father. The countess said modestly, dropping her eyes with shame. Valoa was surprised at such a strange request. Why monitor the graph, especially since he lives separately and often travels? The girl said that she would give in to the Cornage countess. Valoa thought that she heard without believing her ears. Lenoa quickly ran away from the countess without looking back. Valoa called the girl, but everything was in vain. She ran away. The girl was outraged. What it was now at all. How Lenoa dared to tell her about Cardan. When the girl was taken away by the servants in tears, she turned around and saw the Cardan looked at the countess. He has feelings. Valoa stood in her nightie in front of the king. He looked at her in love with a look. The countess thought at that moment, Cardan actually did not love her. He is faithful to the countess. His gaze speaks more than his mouth. Lenoa thought. After what she saw, she herself did not want to fight for love anymore. The king decided to have mercy on the girl, and she left. Meanwhile, Count Lenoa thanked Valoa for the liberation of his daughter and get rid of punishment. He was happy. The girl was still gratitude. If possible, he will substitute her. The count swore that his words were honest. The countess did not listen to Count Lenoa. She was not interested. She studied the papers and thought about her. Let it say. An interesting thought came to her. If the count really wants to thank her, she has one option, how to do it. Lenoa slammed his hands with happiness. What the countess came up with him. He was in anticipation of the assignment. The princess asked to introduce her to the slave war. Once again, she calculated everything ahead and thought about it. The count was scared and began to speak. The slave trade is illegal. He does not know anything about it. The countess did not believe him. No need to be so surprised. She asks for a reason. She has great interest in the slave trade market, Valoa said. The count was afraid that Cardan would learn about this, but the girl assured that this would not happen. This is in her interest too. The Marquis of Trebier, we can say by chance that the countess considers his daughter as a concubine, Valoa suggested. After a while, Trebier invited the countess to his castle. She was very happy about the invitation and asked for forgiveness for employment. The count arrived from afar as soon as he found out that he was looking for Countess Valoa. He was also glad of their meeting. With them was Count Lenoa. He watched the conversation as he conveyed the news of Trebier and was interested in success. As expected, the Marquis is hostile, since Valoa took power into her own hands, moving the previous emperor. With the Marquis was his daughter, Madame Trebier. She also agreed to come to a meeting with Princess Valoa. The girl was, as expected, with brown hair and green eyes. In appearance, quiet and educated. Cardan will like her. Valoa told Trebier that she was thinking of inviting the king as a concubine, his daughter. Valoa thought out everything. The count asked, "And if there is a batch, as with Countess Lenoa, the princess will take responsibility for his daughter." "Don't worry," the princess said. "The emperor is looking for a calm and reasonable girl. His daughter approaches this role." The count agreed. "His daughter is really calm," the countess said. "He does not want to help Cardan alone and think about the family. In the family of Valoa, problems with the legacy and the king are simply necessary for a concubine," the girl said, drinking a little wine from the glass. Trebier thought, it's really time for them to get a family. He liked the idea of the princess, and he supported her. Let it be so. Before the transaction, the countess suggested enjoying irreparable entertainments. "We need to relax, later all state affairs." The count did not understand what Valoa was talking about, but he was interested to have fun and relax from government and trade. He broke into a smile. How he can help Princess? The count wanted to start the game as soon as possible. The girl suggested checking serviceability and readiness. The plan began to work, and she was happy with her success. The count brought Valoa to the slave market. She wanted to get acquainted with slaves and see the situation. Trebier asked the princess to put a mask on his face so that no one would recognize them and nothing to suspect. The Count opened the door, and there was a forest tower downward. Trebier said, "We are here." And he led the princess forward. Prisoners in chains and handcuffs sat everywhere. There were blood spots everywhere. The sight is not for the faint of heart. The guests in masks looked as if they had come to some ball. They had fun with slaves and drank wine. Valoa and the Count entered the hall. There were tables and near them with prisoners everywhere. The market looked as strange as possible. The girl saw how rudely they treated the slaves they pulled and beat them. They did not have the strength to resist. They submitted. The princess nervously began to crush her dress. She needs to behave at ease and calmly so that no one suspects. She understood that it was not the time to act. She had a plan. Its goal is to destroy this slave market. In the corner of the hall stood guards with weapons and spears in iron uniforms. They guarded a man. Ahead was a bald stranger in a rich robe. He was thoughtful and serious. He watched everyone. Trebier said, "This person is the owner of the market. He is a little cruel given what he is doing, but he knows his job well." The man folded his hands and asked, "On what issue did Valoa and Trebier come?" Hands were completely decorated with rings. Why such an outstanding person? Like the princess honored such a contemptuous person like him, the girl thought. He knows who she is and hints that she does not waste time, but immediately went to business. She wanted to get a share. If she receives slaves from the market, contributes to its legalization. The owner was shocked by words. Trebier was also surprised by the words of the princess. He turned around and asked, "Is it really true? She wants to join." There is no better pretext for receiving grossbooks and notes about moving slaves than legalization. The princess thought, "Can a bargain who abducts and sells people for the sake of profit reject her offer?" The owner thought, "Perhaps I will refuse." After a long thought, the man said, he was unprofitable for this proposal from Valoa. Princess and the Count were shocked. How he could refuse such a proposal. It turns out she in vain came here. The Count shouted, "Fow, what found you? Really don't understand what a chance it is." The owner replied that he had no guarantees. Valoa thought that Faust's desires to think over and have guarantees from the princess. Quite reasonable. She cannot give up. The tyrant should fall in love with Princess Esselin. The war between the countries is also not far off. Valoa should prevent at least a rebellion of slaves and get time to avoid the script. As a gratitude, she is ready to invest 1,000,000,000 league. This is sufficient evidence for sincerity. This is a very large sum for such an insignificant person as him. Faizi answered, "It was evident that the proposal is tempting to him. He is pleased that such are interested in his petty business, but he likes the current situation." He refused again. It is somehow suspicious that the Fayus has rejected such a profitable offer, Valoa thought. The Count said that the Faus was crazy. Is it really not about money? The girl thought. But in what then what the market owner wants to get, if not money? The man was silent, immersed in his thoughts. The proposal was very tempting and profitable, but not for him and not now. Behind him stood a girl who overheard the whole conversation. Faust did not notice the presence and was immersed in his thoughts. Well, if this is the will of Faust, Valoa will come again when there will be an opportunity for a transaction. The facet was not going to give up. She held out her hand to the market owner to shake. The man thought, and was in no hurry to answer the hands of the countess. Finally he got up and said, "Fine." He meet with the countess again, but not the fact that she can convince him, the count said. Fao did not agree to the proposal. Because he knows the countess poorly, he will try to persuade him. Valoa answered, "Not worth it. She can handle it herself." Faust is a stranger and is not as simple as it seems at first glance. He is from Esland. Why would he come right here to arrange a slave market? This is weird, the girl thought. The ego handsome was strong. And behind a business with the market, someone else is worth it. But who and why is it necessary? If the count does not want to be accused of treason, it is better to break relations with the slave market, Valoa said. He mastered the mines, and that is why he got involved in the slave trade. How does she know everything? The count thought. He was amazed. Valoa will return all prisoners to their lands and asks the count to return their status. He said that he would do everything. She will pay the count for another service. The count answered, Of course he will do anything. He must follow the Fayus, who he meets, where he finds slaves. The Count must report to Valoa all about this. To begin with, they will go like this. Then she had a different plan. Suddenly someone screamed, "Save my brother!" The Countess turned into a cry. One of the slaves was furious. She screamed and asked where her brother was. She begged to save him and cried bitterly. It looks like one of the slaves resists. This often happens. The Count whispered to the ear of Waloa, "Damn the slave market." The slaves were barefoot, and the girl drew attention to this. What a terrible atmosphere here. She wanted to leave as soon as possible. Suddenly, one of the slaves hit the guard next to the girl with all his might. The guard flew to the side and fell to the floor. The man screamed. The slave broke out and asked to call more security. But the guy continued to beat the man, already his hands. Suddenly, the Countess realized that the guy seemed very familiar to her. Incredible. The Countess could not believe her eyes. This is Lord Iton. What he does here, and how he got here. How he was caught. Because the whole kingdom was looking for him. Iton deftly continued to fight off the attacks of the guards. He was a skilled fighter and owned various ceremony. The guards could not defeat him. Damn slave. They were beaten and exhausted from attacks, tried to get their weapons. He was approaching the manager of the chambers. The guards tried to get up, but could not. The man was scared. The lord slowly approached, and the man screamed, "Where is the security? What she is doing at all?" He was afraid that the slave would harm him. The lord was very angry. They promised him that they would let Catherine in exchange for him. They did not keep their promise. Suddenly, one of the guards approached from behind and hit with all his might, with a sword on the back of the outcome. The lord fell unconscious. Other guards arrived in time for a slave and tried to grab him. The manager shouted, "Tie him so that he could not move." Iton broke up. "Let go! Let go!" shouted Iton. They agreed on a completely different one. He was deceived. He was tied up and thrown to the floor. "Shut up and sit quietly." Catherine ran up to him. She wanted to save him. The manager shouted, "We saw which strong man. If only he will train him to do any work easily." The lord sat connected. Catherine was sitting nearby. The market began auction for such a capable slave. Who will buy it? Valoa was shocked when he saw the lord and Dona. The count noticed and asked, "Princess, you are not good." "No, it became stuffy, probably due to the fact that they are in the basement." The countess answered, "This happens." The count agreed. The girl was nervous. You can't confuse in such a situation. Besides, the count of the killer, attempting to her life. Iton was very angry, but helpless and connected. He wanted to get out of slavery, but he could not. Trading was arranged for him. If the girl pretends to know him, then why she is better than the Princess of Waloa? You need to make a decision, and faster. The manager took bets. Let's start with 1,000 leagues. Those who want to purchase, raise your hand and call your price. Valoa decided to come closer. This is the most exciting sight lately. Finally something interesting. She was without a mask, but interest could not stop her to leave the slave trade market. In addition, the Lord Iton here. The crowd recognized her. This is Princess Valoa in a dress and a wig. And here, already, his hands pulling his hands. People said. The girl laughed. Still everyone considered her brutal, and no one could compare with her. But this is all about the princess. She went to the Lord and Catherine, and pointing her finger at them, "I will buy these." Everyone was surprised by the appearance of Valoa. The princess will give 100 million leagues for 2 slaves and pay immediately. She wanted to buy a lord, Catherine his sister, then her. The manager introduced slaves. Iton Noxos, a 26-year-old man, and a girl, Catherine Noxos, 20 years old. They kneeling. "Now it's your mistress, serve her well," the manager said. "Stop," he said, "Iton Noxos." The countess came in. Upon learning that his sister died after the sale of slaves in the market, he was distraught by grief. With a sword, headed the uprising of slaves. Thanks to the innate talent and anger from loss, he reached the skill of owning a sword and contributed to the fall of the empire. Was Lord Iton really a key person? The manager said. The deal can be terminated, but Waloa went to the end. She bought slaves. Here is the summa promised. She said the countess and handed the manager a full bag of gold coins, 100,000 leagues. Thanks for the invitation, Vala said. Let her call her next time. Slaves stood in front of her, all the head of her head. The Lord raised his head and said, Mistress. Such appeals were surprised by Valoa. He doesn't remember who stands in front of him. The Lord continued timidly, Can he turn to her so shamelessly? This is a very nice appeal, the princess thought. She decides to listen to the request. The Lord said that his sister is not to blame. All the wine lies on him. He did not ask him for his past misconduct. He is ready to accept any death. Patowing continued to say the Lord. The Lord begged only one thing, let his sister Catherine go. The Countess was not surprised at such a request. He wanted to save his sister. The girl realized that the Lord thinks that she bought them only out of revenge, given the notorious glory of the Princess Valoa. He was preparing for his death. The Lord is ready to receive any punishment in return to the will of his sister. The girl thought. After thought, she said, Well, I will restore your sister's status. She is not a real princess and not so cruel. Itan was very surprised by this decision and nobility of the princess. He insanely thanked her for such a service. He is ready to pay this even at the cost of his own life. The bow was beaten off in front of Princess Valoa. The Marquis looked strangely. Why are you looking so? Asked the princess. I saw that you are fulfilling the requests of slaves. The Lord said, How observant he is. Of course, how she will not fulfill the request of her future lover. The girl decided to joke. All were shocked, but then the Lord said, That's why you bought it. What taste you have. Number Valoa firmly answered. Meanwhile, a raven flew into the palace. He reported the news about the princess, the king. He listened carefully to the bird, and he thought why she pretended to be so good. Will she really make her lover? Cardan was surprised. Meanwhile, Valoa, along with Katrine and Catherine, returned to the palace. The princess decided to ask why Itan wanted to kill her. Due to debts. His father was an avid player and packed all the money in gambling. Eaton answered, Ultimately, due to debts, his father had to leave Catherine as a pledge in the slave trade market. The usurer told him, or he sells Catherine into slavery and repays the debt either. The Lord did not have time to say, Kills her. The princess continued instead of the Lord. The Lord nodded in response. Now everything became clear to her why he did this. Itan continued. But the attempt failed, and they, together with Catherine, were both sold. My sister slept on his shoulder. The princess was indignant. She gave him a chance then to admit why he had nothing to say on her journey. The Lord answered, He is not blind and not deaf, as after all the rumors he could trust the princess. The girl was in shock with recognition. Now he understood that the servants were false. He thought that if he was caught and interrogated, there was a tenant after killing him. The girl thought. If she were a real princess, Eaton would not have reached the capital. Death would be in place. She had a headache, but still she decided to ask something else in the last. So far there was such an opportunity. The customer was the Dowager Empress. Valoa asked. Number Eaton firmly answered, looking into the eyes of the princess. After a short silence, he continued. It was the employer Fas. This was not easy for Lorda, but he was supposed to. The Dowager Empress always stared closely at the princess, interfering with her. I did not miss the opportunity to annoy the slave trader who wanted to kill her hands. They were both natives of Eastland, another country. Valoa thought that all this happened due to the fact that King was a princess from Eastland. But now I understood everything. The war, the uprising of slaves, and the fall of the empire were all carefully planned by the Dowager Empress. They arrived at the palace, and leaving the carriage of the girl, stagnated. The head was terribly sick of the news and the recognition of Outen. She probably overstirred too much. You need to be calmer and think everything over at your leisure. You need to go to the office. The Lord Iton said to her, You are okay on the hostess. He was grateful to the princess and worried about her. She turned to him, but he interrupted her. What a lord! He is not even general of the guard, just Eaton, as befits a slave. Slavery is illegal, the princess answered. But still, he asked her to call it just Eton. Okay, the girl answered dutifully. She will give them with her sister and asks to leave the capital and start a new life somewhere else. Eton answered harshly, Don't want. And such an answer was very surprised by Valoa. Why he does not want, she gives him freedom. He asked for release only for Catherine, so that he would pay the debt even at the cost of his life. The guy continued, "This is not an empty chatter, but the princess can object to him how to trust him already to betray. He will take an oath of allegiance." The girl said there was no need and thought, "Softly creeps, this is another Balaam, and there are two with the sisters." She thought, "She does not have more than one supporter, and it will not be easy to destroy the market of slaves alone. She is a Newton supporter to deal with the market once and for all." Valoa decided. She wants to ask for the help of Utno, whether he is ready in this case, always with her as an advisor. Looking staring at the Lord, asked Valoa. She held out her hand in the conclusion of the deal. She needed help, and Eaton was a good option for this. The Lord agreed with joy. He took the princess's hand and answered, "Yes, the mistress." He wanted to serve his savior. Eton's face came out beautiful, the girl thought. She told the guy, "Well, let's go to the castle." The raven followed them. Suddenly, a Cardan appeared, he thought. What extraordinary attachment to her lover even made her advisor. The princess saw Cardan. He nodded to the Suvoro in response and said, "Princess, there is a conversation." He wanted to talk in private. He invited the princess to his chambers, and they went together to him. The girl thought about what the king wanted to talk to her. Not having time to close the door, the prince attacked the princess. Not any legalization, stumble from the market of slaves. He said Suvoro. The girl replied that she was not going to legalize him. Karan was sure that she was lying to him and continuing to do it. He learned that she secretly participated in the auction with the Marquis Trebier and met with the slave trader. How to perceive it? It is impossible to princess, instead of understanding, legalizing the slave trade. She did not meet for this. The princess began to cry from the accusations of Cardan. He did not react to the tears of the princess. He considered himself right, the girl thought. It is useless that she does not say he still does not believe her. You need to act differently. Cardan did not look away. He looked angrily at the princess and waited for her to tell him this time. If he does not trust her so much, let him fight, the princess said. Such a proposal surprised Cardan. She decides to attract Cardan to her plan. So even better if he approves him with her hands will be untied, the girl thought convincingly. If the interrogation is already late after that, it will be too late. The Lord saw that the girl began to lose consciousness and fall. He did not understand what was happening and was shocked. The doctor said, "Strong overwork. It looks like she had too many worries lately." The girl was unconscious. Cardan grabbed his head. What a frail she is. Only this was not enough for him. To worry about her and take care of her again. The doctor asked, "Prepare medicines to strengthen health." Valoa was very weak. She felt bad. "As soon as possible." The count answered after a short silence. He stood nearby and looked at the unconscious princess. The next morning, the girl woke up from the bright sun. She woke up from a long sleep. What happened? Why is she in bed? She remembers how she cursed with a tyrant about the market of slaves. After the continuous darkness that happened, the head does not hurt at all. Once here, she often suffers from a headache. Having checked her head, the princess noted. She was about to get up, but suddenly a Cardan came and glorified her. He put Valoa again in bed. The girl was dumbfounded. "And wherever you secretly wanted to slip away?" Suvoro asked him, pointing a finger in the girl's face. He was angry. Why did he come here? The girl was embarrassed, and she was annoyed by this behavior of Cardan. Why he sees her in this form? This is actually her bedroom. She said the countess. "There is nothing at all that I took care of you all night." Cardan said, "This despot was looking for. Also after me." I could not believe in Waloa heard. He exactly tells the truth. She nodded guiltily and said, "Thank you." What did he think again? "We drove." The king answered shortly. Cardan timidly continued, "Yesterday he was wrong. Perhaps the girl was bad because of his scream and she lost consciousness. Let's fight together with the slave trade." Suddenly the king continued. The girl was surprised. Did he really agree? And even apologized. "This is a dream. She has a dream." She asked, "You are serious? And what if he plays with her again? and lies right into the eyes. She was very happy, pretending to believe. "Thank you very much, Your Majesty," the girl said. Cardan was surprised at the so joyful reaction of Valoa to his consent. What did the princess plan again? The market is controlled by Esselendet's faces. They abduct people and sell them. Surely from the submission of the Dowager Empress. Is it not obvious that the Empress is behind this? A foreigner, a commoner, would not do this without support. She thought he was only for women and alcohol. The pot of the king is cooking, the Countess thought. They say that if people change, then death is soon, the end is really close, the girl thought. How to relate to her arrogance. Then, for starters, she will run up a spy to find out the scale of the slave trade and who is behind this. The Count answered. Fine. Why is he constantly looking at me so closely? Looking into the eyes of the king, the girl thought. What does his gaze say? Cardan admired the mind and quick wideness of the princess. He stared at her, immersed in his thoughts. By the way, the last time she promised to find a concubine that the king would like. It seems to be found, Valoa said. Cardan was angry. I don't need some kind of... The king began to scream, but stopped remembered what the doctor said. So that there are no more fainting, she needs to avoid stress. Cardan decided to calm down and keep himself in his hands. He answered briefly, Do it well as you want. But it was evident that such a custody of the princess annoyed him. Valoa met in the garden with Madame Trebier. The girl was luxurious in a green dress and looked joyful. The princess clapped her hands with admiration. Impeccable. Now it remains to set a date for a visit to the palace. The girl circled in front of the princess, waving her dress. She really wanted to see the king and meet, but suddenly she, like Mrs. Lenoa, will be kicked out on the same day. This happened due to the fact that the princess did not teach her etiquette. Valoa wrote out of the capital the most eminent etiquette teacher. Thank you for taking care of me, the girl answered. You, too, are probably a secret to try feelings for His Majesty. Madame Trebier asked. Princess. Valoa was surprised. You cannot hide from me. I was in your place, and I understand everything. I'm even more grateful for support, continued Trebier. Contact me if you need help. I am always ready to pay for her, the girl said to the princess. What a déjà vu. Why does she have such a bad foreboding? Valoa thought about the behavior of Mrs. Trebier. In the evening, the princess was very nervous in the castle. She went nervously there and back to her office. Eaton noticed this. Is something bothering you? He asked the princess. He moved why Valoa is so nervous that it happened. She just worries about Mrs. Trebier, Valoa said. You have prepared it perfectly. She will be with the king, Eaton said. Princess also hoped that everything will be fine. But there was already a precedent, despite good training. The girl thought. What a precedent? Eaton asked. But suddenly the door swung open, and a Cardan entered the princess. He looked excited. He stared at the count and princess. But he was silent without saying a word. As if I watched what would happen next. Valoa froze. Why is he here, like Madame Trebier? She asked excitedly. Really, something happened. Are you talking about the daughter of the Marquise Trebier? Cardan asked. The girl froze in anticipation of the answer. She was very nervous. Forgive the princess, but this is a failure again. As a result, the king answered ironically. But despite the news, he looked quite happy. The Marquis of Trebier is damn stupid. After a small pause, Cardan said, He thought where the countess finds such concubines. Valoa was perplexed by the words of the king. As a marquise can be stupid. She did not believe her ears. Maybe she was heard. The marquise that has passed in a few days scrupulous teaching etiquette and received knowledge necessary for the aristocrat. She survived the merciless and demanding drill from eminent teachers. He really talks about her or confused with someone. The girl laughed. The mistress who mastered the rules of etiquette was praised that he forced him to think about her. Cardan asked her how to improve the tax policy of the empire or diplomatic mission, but she answered mediocre. The king answered, Who generally asks for this on the first night? Of course, no one will answer such questions. The princess was indignant. Disadvantages of the tax system and ways to correct them. Cardan asked. The tax burden is too large. The girl answered. A phased decrease in the marginal tax rate is necessary. You see, You answered. The king noted the king of the princess. She answered because she got everything. The princess thought, but she answered, I was forced to become a princess at a young age, the one who did not even receive an education, like the heiress. The king said harshly in a whisper, looking into the eyes of the princess. It sounded as if he knew how the princess grew. How does he know this? The girl thought. She was surprised at the words of Cardan. Cardan and Valoa were not just political opponents. The girl thought. Comfort the princess and send home. The king said. At the ball, the crowd was discussing. Due to the discrepancy between the interests of the marquise and the emperor, they cannot find common topics for conversation. The princess announced to everyone, officially. Unfortunately, it was decided not to take the marquise in concubines. The marquis was silent. The princess thought he would shout from his daughter. But no, if he has a conscience, he will not do this. The princess fulfilled her part of the contract. Suddenly, the count approached and asked, Speak as it is, princess. Why the daughters refused. The countess barely came up with something folding and did not want to answer. But Cardan suddenly said, Because she is damn stupid. Why did the king say this? The princess tried to save her authority and began to say that the answer did not suit the king. He asked for tax reforms, but who can keep up with the deep and endless knowledge of the emperor? The princess continued. Such a speech was surprised by Cardan. He did not know that the princess of such a high opinion of him. But she tried to save her authority. The meeting ended, and everyone left the imperial hall. Everyone thought about what had happened and were surprised by such a turn. The princess was very tired and desperate. To open her plan failed. How to please Cardan. But suddenly the girl was called. Do not despair. We know how you tried. Emperor is an extraordinary person. Throw it out of your head. People said. They are on her side. What a sudden comforting party is this, the girl thought. But she was very pleased. Thank you. Thanks to you it became easier for me. The princess thanked. Suddenly a man said that he has a daughter. She wants to become the concubine of the emperor. The princess asked. No, how could you say that? The man answered. Recently, in fact, he heard rumors about the daughter of Count Manhwa. Something happened to the princess. The girl asked. The column is pouring a marriage proposal for his daughter from all sides after that situation. The man said. They have nowhere to fall from an apple from a marriage proposal. And all this thanks to the special training of the princess. What? Vala asked. The marquise is still in the castle, receiving uninitiated lessons on politics. It is good that the princess supports the failed. The man said that he was asking the princess to take care of his daughter. His wife pushed him and began to shout that she was the first. They began to fight among themselves for the championship and pound each other. The princess was evil from such behavior. A few days later, the princess went on a trip and collected cages with pigeons with her. The servants helped her. Itan asked, Where does it go? At the Valoa estate. The princess answered, It seems empty for too long. Before that, she came to Cardan to ask for permission to let her go to the family estate. You have planned something again, the king asked sternly. He did not trust the princess after everything that happened. The princess smiled. What are you talking about? It seems there was no owner too long. At the same time and rest from unnecessary affairs, she was still begged for barons and marquises to teach their daughters. She's tired of it. Eden decided to go after the princess. Itan wanted to be near to protect the princess. He wanted to serve her correctly because she saved him and her sister. The princess was surprised. Is there anyone else besides the debtor who will protect her? Whether she needs protection, she ordered the N to stay in the palace and inform her of the news. Eden dutifully obeyed the princess, although he wanted to go together. Valoa cannot take him to the estate with him because there will probably be evidence regarding Eleanor. The carriage with the princess left. Itan remained to see her gaze without suspecting that the Cardan raven again followed him. Suddenly, Iden heard the noise on the tree and turned around. He saw a raven who emphasized, This raven is suspicious, the guy thought. Meanwhile, the raven caught up with the princess to the princess and flew after it, accompanying her. It was necessary to report the news of the Cardan. The carriage was driving very slowly. At this pace, we have time to get in the evening. The girl thought she was bored. Suddenly, she heard a noise in cages with pigeons. They were covered. Why they raged so much, probably hungry. Among the pigeons was a raven with a white head. The pigeons pecked him. Another where he came from. The princess thought. She took him in her hands and began the raven. Kargul, Kargul. It was difficult for him to be done by a dove, but it was necessary. Strange verps are heard in his cry. So this is the raven which is everywhere dragged with her, a cardan. Suddenly recognized the bird of the princess. Why his head is white, and how he even leaked into a carriage and a cage with pigeons. But suddenly, the raven escaped and flew away. She shouted after, "You are you! Just try to spy on me again." The countess was very angry with such a court of the cardan. They arrived at the Valoa estate. It was very large and beautiful, with a high fence and a fence at the entrance. "Is this the Valoa estate?" The princess stopped in surprise at the gate, examining the castle with admiration. Such a scale! The maid came up and bowed, said, with the return of the princess. The girl could not get used to that it was her estate. Next to her were two servants, who also bowed. They waited for the princess to receive the news of her return. To celebrate the return of the princess, the cook surpassed himself and prepared a whole feast. Continued the maid. "Come on." The princess headed for the servants. The countess asked whether the maid will feed her pigeons before dinner. The girl apologized. They were not prepared, since the princess first brought pigeons. They will now prepare food. How then she ate in the residence? So it will not work. There is too little information about the princess. The girl thought. There were many servants. Will she be able to find traces of Eleanor without betraying herself? Valoa was nervous. The servants set the table. She had a plan that needs to be made in order to reveal the secret and find the evidence of Eleanor. But for starters, dinner. For dinner, mushroom soup and fruit salad, an oyster plate with caviar, and a veal steak. I introduced a made dish. Here he is, the scope of the greatest princely kind. It seems in terms of luxury is not inferior to the imperial court. But if I want to check food for the poison, she needs to bring pigeons here, the girl thought. But how to say about it? Suddenly, the girl apologized and took a spoon herself to try the princess's food. Valoa was shocked. Is it really that a maid checks her food in Valoa's estate? She is clearly a devoted supporter of the princess, if she knows about the threat. It turns out the maid always supported the countess and was on her side. She can be trusted, the girl thought. She tilted the girl and said in a whisper, "I want to see Eleanor right now." She could not continue to not know further. Valoa said strictly, "Please." She must finally find out more information about what is happening. The girl silently looked at Valoa in surprise. Her request surprised the girl, but she obeyed. Having called into her bell, she called the servants, and they came to listen to the instructions of the maid. "Called, madam. Close all the outer doors and cure all the windows." The girl commanded, clearly understanding what to do. As ordered earlier, let all the servants move along the worked routes within 3 hours. "Eat," the guys answered. They left the dining room marching like soldiers. The girl ran a look at them. The princess was perplexed. The girl turned to the princess. Her gaze was strange. Valoa did not understand what would happen next. The maid sat on her knees and said, "I spend you a princess where Lady Eleanor is to be." They set off the long corridor of the estate to the dowager princess. The girl illuminated the path with a lantern. Vala followed and was silent. She thought about what would happen further, but worried about future events. The maid turned around and said, "Do not worry, the movement of the staff will disguise their movements. So why is this pacing along the routes? If everyone will move at the same time, no one can attack the trail. Even the most sensitive person, like Mr. Sword." Valoa thought to myself. She began to understand what was happening. They went to the door. We came to the maid and opened the doors with a creak. They went inside. Before the eyes of the girl, the chic chambers of Eleanor spread. It was very comfortable and beautiful here. The style was present. Lie Eleanor still rests in bed, the maid said, approaching the bed with the princess. Valoa saw a beautiful sleeping girl on the bed. Is this woman Eleanor, really? She had blonde hair. She looks much older than she was in the photo. Too old for his beloved, to zero more on the mother. The girl thought. How did Cardan know that she did not know anything about the contract? The girl tried to collect the facts in her head in one. The princess trembled. The maid noticed this and called out to her. She was worried that the princess became bad. The girl turned around and said, "Help me, I lost my memory." She decided to admit this girl to find out more. The maid asked, "How Walla lost her memory? Either the side effect of poison or hit her head." The princess said. The girl fell to her knees and began to cry. "My girl!" Valoa was shocked by such a reaction of the servant. The princess knelt down in front of the girl and with hope in her voice asked, "You can help me return my memory." "Of course, mistress, I'll tell you everything," Hugs the maid said. She sincerely wanted to help the princess. Valoa thought, does she know that her beloved girl is no longer in this world? The past princess is no longer. They sat down at the table, and the girl began the story. Valoa was born from the connection of a hereditary prince and a maid. "Extraordinary child," the princess asked in surprise. In response, the girl only nodded her head silently. How so? The girl hated this word. She was the girlfriend of Valo's mother. She often hurt and always had poor health. When the princess's mother was very ill, the maid had to become a nurse for the little princess. She was always true. So they lived, enjoying peaceful days in the outbuilding. But when Valoa was 5 years old, mothers diagnosed infertility. The prince was a greedy man and made his daughter, the wife of the crown prince, to turn the emperor as he wants. At first, the maid was glad that Valoa would become a princess and could enjoy the luxury that she did not have. But very quickly, I realized that I was mistaken. The girl was not happy in the king's castle. She was sad and cried. Valoa was scared. She did not like the life in the palace, and she wanted to return to her home while she was small. The maid nervously shouted her hand and continued. She was tormented many times, whether to escape with the little princess. But I never did it. Valoa was surprised by such a decision. If she was so worried about her, why did not run away? Lady Eleanor took care of the princess very well and did not have a good relationship with Cardan. Valoa was shocked. They were friends with the prince before he left on the battlefield. After the departure of the Cardan, everything changed. Valoa stopped visiting the palace. Gradually, Valoa took all the concerns about her gender, and the maid almost did not manage to meet her. Once the girl brought Lady Eleanor to the family estate. Then everyone was very surprised by such a decision and appearance. Then the lady barely breathed. They did not call her some doctors. All as one said that there was no hope. After all the attempts of the doctors, the princess said to prepare a candle, and the maid went to the temple to bring it. In fact, a candle that stood in the temple is a marshmallow candle, not princesses. She put her there. With these words, the maid gave the princess a chest. "Here is your real candle." Opening the chest, said the girl. There were 2 candles in the chest. One was burning, and the other faded. The fading candle belongs to Lady Eleanor. Is there something else that the princess ordered Eleanor to her estate? Eat. The servant answered timidly. If the princess candle goes out, she asked to kill the lady, too, with her on the same day. Concluding the story, the girl said, Valoa ran out with a box in the night garden. She was shocked by history, but now everything became clear to her. The girl fled, pressing the box to her chest. Now it is clear why Cardan emphasized as a puppet of Valoa, why so stubbornly came to the rescue of the princess, whom he hated. I recalled Cardan's fight with Lord Endon. After all, if Cardan wants to kill the princess, he must abandon his mother. This is very difficult, the princess thought. The princess entered into an agreement with the life of Eleanor. As a collateral, by which anything can do anything with the Cardan. The girl stood with a casket in the middle of the garden and realized what a tyrant she was actually, and not someone else. She screamed, Your Majesty, I know that you are here. I wanted to talk about Eleanor. She had to talk with the Cardan. Suddenly, a king appeared out of the darkness. There is no need to scream like that. I hear everything perfectly, he said, looking at the princess. The girl began to speak. As the king himself knows very well, she lived for several months, completely nothing. Cardan listened carefully to Valoa. What did she want to tell him what she remembers all? He thought. Only today she remembered what kind of contract they had. The girl continued, looking into the eyes of the king. It was very difficult for her. You! he said angrily, grunting to the Cardan's teeth. What this tyrant did with his mother, he thought. She is alive in general. As if feeling the mood of the king, said the girl. Do not worry, everything is fine with Lady Eleanor. She is about something else. The girl was going with her thoughts. She did not know how to continue to speak, given the evil look and the mood of the Cardan. The king was waiting for the princess to say. His patience was at the limit, but he kept himself in his hands with all his might. Does it not want to conclude a Cardan with the princess a new agreement? The girl finally said. The king was very surprised. With these words, the princess opened her casket with a burning candles and handed it off to Cardan. She was waiting for the answer. Cardan did not believe his ears. What is such she offers him and generally talks about? He sharply bounced to the side. The princess did not remember what was happening. Why the Cardan has such a reaction to her offer. She wants the best. Suddenly, the king approached the girl and sharply grabbed the box from her hands. Valoa did not expect such a turn. He angrily asked, grabbing the box. Again, he will hang noodles on the ears. He did not believe Valoa. He knew what a tyrant she was. Cardan grabbed the girl by the shawl. Only a madman will believe the princess, knowing all her actions. He was very angry. I will no longer try to manipulate you and threaten you to get benefits, Valoa said. Cardan froze in shock. This means the princess will return his mother to him, he asked, letting go of the girl Cardan, with hope in her voice. He so wanted to see his mother. The princess was a little urinated, and then she said that this was excluded. She was afraid of the reaction of the Cardan, but she had no other choice. In return, the princess guarantees the safety of his mother. But how can she say this? Keep her mother at home? Cardan thought. This means that so far the king has not killed Valoa. Lady Eleanor is safe. She needed to survive at all costs. How he can trust her? The king asked. He had no confidence in the princess after everything that happened to his mother. Do you have a choice? Valoa asked. Although she lost her memory, she still remains the princess. Does Cardan consider that he will be able to save his mother whole and unharmed? The girl asked, holding an open box. There is only one way to protect Eleanor. It is to guarantee safety to her. The princess continued confidently. Cardan smiled yehidly. Here is such behavior and proposals, similar to the princess. He had no choice. He held out his hands to pick up the box and accept the princess's offer. He must save the life of his mother at all costs. The next day, a carriage from the imperial palace arrived at Valoa's estate. The princess was about to leave. The maid asked. The princess could not stay yet. She had not been to the estate for a long time. But Valoa was not going to stay. The girl wanted to say something to the maid, but hesitated. She was embarrassed to ask her about the service, given everything that happened. Finally, she just said, I ask you, as always, to take care of everything. The maid was surprised. This is obvious. Do not worry about the lady. Happy path, the maid said. And Valoa went to the carriage to leave the estate. Sitting, the princess exhaled in relief. How tired she is these days. So many things happened, she was exhausted. Suddenly, someone pulled the carriage door. The girl was surprised who could be. Did the maid forgot something? It was a Cardan. He held in his hands a casket with candles. He also headed for the palace and decided to ride together. Of course, sit down. The girl answered friendly. Despite nothing, she was glad to see the king and respected him. I thought to myself, here I have life. I wanted to take a breath in private, but apparently not fate. We'll have to be content with the company. The road was long, and the princess fell asleep. She dreamed of something, and she twitched in a dream. Cardan noticed that Wallow twitched. She probably dreams of some nightmare, the king thought to himself. He looked intently at the behavior of the girl. Because weak, Cardan decided for himself. He recalled her promises and understood that the princess would not say this. The king grabbed his head. He is confused. Is it possible to believe that the princess has changed? He was tormented by doubts. No, she, as always, tries to blow my head. The king decided nevertheless. He had great doubts. Valoa continued to sleep. She dreamed of something and began to mutter in a dream. Attracting the attention of Cardan, he looked at the girl. Sorry, I was wrong. Valoa spoke in a dream. Apparently the dream was terrible, and the princess began to cry. What can she dream? Cardan reached out with his hand to the princess's face. He thought what to do. Wake up and calm, or wipe tears. He pulled himself. That he was just about to do, why he held out his hand. This is a woman, like an enemy to me. Why all this? Suddenly, the king jumped and shook the carriage. From this, the princess woke up what was happening. The door is open. The carriage rings, she shouted. Your Majesty, you are fine. Why did he jump out of the racing carriage? What happened? The girl thought. The palace is still far away. Where is it? But suddenly, Valoa noticed that the Cardan left the box in the carriage. Cardan, meanwhile, walked in the palace. He thought he was shaken. He did not understand what was happening to him and what he was doing, all due to the fact that we were together in this cramped carriage. And all her actions play on my nerves. The king thought. Suddenly, he heard a scream. Your Majesty, wait! Behind him, with a box in his hands, was Valoa. She stopped the carriage. Don't get closer to me. Turning to the princess, shouted the king. He did not want to see anyone, especially her. Sorry, but you left, leaving the box. She held out Valoa. She wanted to return the king's thing. This is part of the contract, she asked with a smile. Their contract is still valid. What happened? Why did he run away from the carriage so abruptly? Yes, so Valoa must certainly keep his promise. Cardan answered decisively. He worried about his mother, so that he does not abandon his mother, because he so much wanted to kill the princess. The living should live, Cardan said. With these words, the king took the casket from the hands of the princess and went on his way. He will not go with her. The living should live. These words seemed familiar to Valoa. She already heard them somewhere before, but where? She recalled how the maid told her these words when the girl was sitting near Lady Eleanor's bed. She will definitely live well. These words echoed in the girl's head. Why did she remember this? Oh, what is this memory? Her head was dizzy, and she decided to continue the way in order to be distracted. After a while, the carriage arrived at the gates of the palace. Valoa finally returned to the castle. Ahead is a lot of things, the girl thought. In the corridor, she saw the results who talked with the servant and decided to approach to find out the latest news from the palace. Young people noticed her and turned around to greet her, but suddenly fell silent when they saw the princess. They were confused by the appearance. Mistress, you have a wound on the neck, Eden said. The princess's neck was inflamed, and there was a wound. She grabbed her neck. Etan excitedly ran to the princess. He worried and asked how she was injured and what happened. They attacked her. The girl was confused. She did not know about the wound on her neck, and even more so how it happened to her. What to answer the lord? Someone tried to turn her neck. The princess decided to answer. What? In surprise, Etan asked him, surprised at such an answer. But he can really do this, so she closed her eyes to it. The girl continued. This is a joke. Idan hoped. She was suddenly attacked in the estate. He said that he should be near to protect the princess. The lord was angry. He tensed and remembered. On the day when the princess left, he saw a raven who followed her. Idan said, the emperor did not accidentally inflict this wound on his neck. Touching Valoa, the lord asked. He was sure that it was Cardan. The girl pushed Utona. Ah, no, this is a trifling wound. Do not worry, the girl said. Why does he behave like that? Etan decided not to leave the princess unattended and said, Come on, I'll call the doctor right now. The doctor came to the princess's office. Suddenly, they knocked on the door. Log in. The girl answered, Is Cardan really come, or who could it be? Count Trebier came. He found out that the princess returned and came to greet. What happened to you, the wound on the neck? There is nothing like that. A small incident, the princess answered. She did not want to talk about it, especially with Count Trebier. What is the matter of the count himself? Surely he came not just to say hello, the princess said. Yes. The count answered, looking around. It seems that the Faust guessed about their plan. Although the count buys slaves and behaves as usual, they suspect him. He lured the aristocrats and got a new client. It is not surprising why the empress has no lack of funds. Valoa thought that the departure of Trebier would be a significant blow to the market. But no. So this is for the client? The girl asked. Trebier tensed. This is the eldest son of Count Lenoa. Recently, it often has been wiped in Faust and is a new client. This did not surprise the princess. The villains of the rich are everywhere. The count continued that he was a good guy. He left to study. Now he returned and made a mistake. Does not understand the situation. Valoa understood that this was excuses, but pretended to believe. She, too, is very interested in a foreign life, and asked the count to organize a meeting with her son, Lenoa. A few days later, the countess and the son of Count Lenoa took place in the palace garden. There was a chic table, the princess said. She heard that the guy from childhood abroad. She often fantasized about trips and decided to meet. The guy replied that he wanted to expand his horizons, so he traveled. No wonder. The princess answered Lucavo. Howard Lenoa laughed. He did not think that he would hear the same conversations abroad as in his homeland. Everyone told him that he is an ideal man, combining the mind and beauty. Howard continued with a grin. On what issue he returned? They say he somehow has a business. No wonder. The son of Lenoa was surprised at the knowledge of the princess. Valoa said that the profane is in business. But I heard that this is such a breakthrough idea that it could change the situation of the market. Head answered, which he himself would like to tell in more detail, but this is a too personal conversation for the first meeting. Perhaps when they recognize each other closer. Howard said maliciously. What he was up to, what he has hoped for. Can nail it, the princess thought to herself with a smile. Too cunning, this Howard is not as simple as she thought. She decided to play along. That's how, I hurried, the princess said and stood up from the table. The guy liked the reaction. In truth, the princess immediately felt that it was fate. The girl continued the game. She had her own plan. Howard's eyes lit up. The princess continued. If they still meet, let him tell you more about himself. She is interesting. Howard sat in his carriage and left. Valoa thought that this man was hiding. He is more complicated than it seemed. Itan was nearby and watched Valoa when the guest left. He came closer. He heard their conversation. Is there a need to meet this buyer? Noticed the lord. Does she really like him? The princess is not like that. Valoa decided to joke, answering. And then that Itan will seduce him. The lord was dumbfounded and did not know what to say on this. She asked whether ITO was executed by the order. He said yes. He covered the wheels of a carriage of flower pollen pyther. When they put it, they will be able to start the pursuit of Howard by the smell of pollen. Great job, Valoa noted.